Hi again. So I've deleted everything that I did in our little intro because we're going to start again piece by piece and including all of the different elements that we need to include. So this lesson is going to be about coordinating input, which we modify in a window and which influence all of our definitions form data that we get from. So this is going to be all about inputs, and then next lesson is going to be about how to organize our outputs. Now, we've got the inputs for our form, and we've got two inputs for our floor splitting component. So that's the number of floors that we're going to want for commercial, office, residential, or amenities, and the floor heights for each of these. So let's get started. First of all, like we saw last time, we launch a window component and we ask it to always be on top. Actually, so you can see this, always on top. But we're going to ignore this for right now, except for the next component that we need, add elements. And so which window? This one. And whatever elements we come up with, we're going to add them here. So let's start here. Now, as we saw in our last video, all that you have to do is to bring a slider into the window is to basically create a slider element, and what we're going to do is just copy all of these and create sliders from them. Now that's 4 of them for this. And what we want to do is then just merge them into one of these components so we can control them a bit better. It's always a good idea to flatten all of these inputs. And we can add these as elements to our window. And so we just add a toggle to the window component, and then we can launch a window. And there they are. So actually what we want to do is change the names, because at the moment they're just showing what the slider shows. So we'll just change them all. Okay, there it is. Now this is as far as we got on our last video, but what we're going to want to do now is just another trick to organize it, because we're going to have several lists of inputs. We're going to have inputs for form, we're going to have inputs for floors, and inputs for floor heights. And there's going to be 3 different sets of inputs. What we can do in order to organize this a bit better, instead of just having a long row of different sliders and inputs, is to actually group each of these sets in UI containers. And again, there's a tab for UI containers. And in here, there's create expander. So there's different ways that we can take several elements and group them in different graphical elements. So you can create a tab view where you click on different tabs to reveal different sets of elements. Create a grid, create a scroll viewer, and so on and so forth. We're going to create an expander. What this does is it takes several elements and it puts them into a little expandable window. And all you have to do here is give it a label. I think in these components, none of these inputs are very explicit, so they usually just have some letter. So what you want to do is just hover over them, and then it'll be kind of quite explicit. So starting state of the expander, true of open. So that's if you want it to be open when you start the window or not. So here's the text to display in the window. And again, when you're looking at these for the first time, and we're exploring all of the different components that Human UI has, then it's just a good idea to hover over all of these, because they're never going to be very explicit. So that's our first little drop down. However, as we mentioned, we can have different sliders appear on our window, but it doesn't really help us out much if it doesn't influence what's happening in the actual script. So, you know, in our introduction video, we were just taking different elements and shoving them on a window. But when you want to get the window to start controlling what goes on in the script, then you've got to just carry out a few more steps, and it can get a little bit complicated, but fortunately for inputs, it's not too complicated yet. The way that we get the Grasshopper to read what's on our window and influence our script is just using this component here in the main tab, a value listener. So this is just going to bring back whatever's on the window for this element. So for radius 1, which I changed here in the window, the value listener is going to read 47. And so we have to bring all of these back into Grasshopper using this component. And then, as you may have guessed, you want to replace the original inputs. So whatever value is used here, it's brought into this component, and that's the component that we actually want to feed into our form finding definition. So that goes to there. So that's a bit extreme. That goes to there. So let's just take them back to something normal. The height goes to there, and the torsion goes to there. So basically you replace all of your original sliders with these new ones. And now, just for speed, let's disable this component. Now, you don't even need to have Grasshopper open in order to modify your script. And this is already becoming much friendlier for any sort of presentation. No? Anybody can just use this very, very simple window to explore the form. And you can hide it when you want to move on to another aspect of the definition. So that's somehow how it works in terms of inputs. So what else do we have? Let's close this for now. So let's just create a group here. There. Now we have the number of floors, which could actually be done nicely using sliders as well, and the floor-to-floor heights. But this we actually want to input manually. So now let's just copy this and call it, let's line all of these up nicely. Call it floor numbers. And this is going from, these sliders are going from 0 to 100, which is not too useful. Let's call it just 1 to 10 for each of these. And then these should correspond to our program types: commercial, office, residential, and amenities. So once again, this is going to feed into our, this is going to be placed into our window. Then the window is going to send us back values, and those are going to be put into as a replacement for what we had previously. So since this was the number of floors was input into this component as a list, let's just make a list to replace it using this merge component. So there it is. All of the values that would be drawn from the window are put into this list, and then we just replace the original list. Okay, and let's change this. So that's the second one, and all that we have to do is take this expander and add it to our add elements window. And so now we've got both of them on there: floor numbers and form parameters. And they're all collapsible. And anything I do here will affect this component, which at the moment is disabled. So let's enable it. And so, whoops, so we forgot to change the slider names. So at the moment, floor numbers are still labeled as radius, 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 radius. No. So let's just change this. It should be commercial, office, residential, and amenities. So that's much better. Now, as we increase the number of commercial floors, you can see how, since they're the highest, the entire thing is changing, and all of our inputs are controlling the model. So, one to go. Now, we actually don't want sliders for floor-to-floor heights. Let's have instead text boxes, so you can enter them manually. So the way that this works is, let's just once again copy this and change name, floor heights. This should all be all right, except for the sliders, which we're getting rid of all of these. And then this should be called floor heights. So now we're going to replace the sliders with this component. This asks for an optional label. So the label is going to be corresponding to the program. And then it's going to ask for starting text. So we're just going to have a default value for each of these. So let's just copy this. Let's write in the right labels and names. So that works. These have to link up to the value listeners. Then these go back to here. And whatever comes out of these value listeners then replaces what we had for these values. So there it goes. Failed from text to number. So what are we actually getting? We should be getting numbers back from here, and we're getting nothing. Probably because we have to actually launch this window. So let's include this here. Let's reopen the window. And we don't actually have any values here, so that's not great. What haven't we done? Oh, we didn't connect the starting values. So we have to connect these to here so that we have something to work with when we're starting. And there it is, and now this is working. So the way that this works is that you actually have to click a button to activate it in this, whatever you typed in, back into your definition. So say we want to change commercial from 6 to 8. You type it in and you click this button, and you can see the first floors are now taller. So that should be it for our inputs. So that's actually a very neat little window which shows everything that you might want to control about this form. in a way that's really organized and anybody can interact with. Although one more thing that we want to do is it can get quite annoying to have everything stacked vertically. So let's try to put all of these into a horizontal bar at the top so we can then have a larger window that fits in more information at the bottom. So let's try that. The way that we're going to do that is, again, with a container. And then there's a container that's called create stack. And that can take several elements and stack them horizontally or vertically. And so this is actually really neat because what we're taking is we've already made containers out of all of these groups. So all of these are already in an expanding window container. However, we can also take these containers and line them up in this horizontal stacking container. So we can just take this one, and this one, and instead of pushing all of these into the add elements component, we just take this one, and now when we launch this window, now they're all going to be on the top bar. Now this is all going to be dependent on your design for your interface. But say, for example, since we want to have a set of inputs and a set of outputs as well that give us information about what we're changing, it's going to be really nice to have a bar along the top, which we can expand and hide, and then have the rest sitting here at the bottom. And then once we're done placing everything, we can alter the size of the initial window so that it can have enough room to display everything. So it's not just a small dinky window whenever you open this up. So that's how we arrange inputs so that we can create elements in the window and then have those elements feed back into the model and control it completely. And so there's nothing that we can't control about our model from this window. And you can just let anybody have at this window and play around with it. And that's what this is all about. It's getting to a point where the interface allows more people who aren't used to the Grasshopper interface to interact with and play with the model, and it works better as in kind of a workshop condition.